All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our little virtual event space. We wish, of course, that you are all here in person, but we are also so grateful to be able to share this virtual space with all of you. So my name is Allie. I'm your host for this evening, and I am so excited to be introducing Tracee Stanley and Anne Phyfe Palmer here to discuss Tracee's book, Radiant Rest. So before we get into the fun stuff, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in and for buying books. For those of you who may not know, we are an independent bookstore with 3 locations in the Seattle area, and your support really is what keeps us here and selling books, and we really love what we do. So if you also love what we do, we'd so appreciate it if you swing by. Oh, okay, don't worry. Don't worry, they will be here any second. In the chat for those of you who didn't see it, don't worry. So if you're not local, if you are local, come on in. We'd love to see you. If you're not local, don't worry. We do ship. I will be linking books in the chat all evening, so they should be easy to find. And we are, of course, so grateful for your support. While you are over on our website, I definitely recommend checking out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up over the next few months. And if you'd like to stay in touch with our events, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update about events and exciting releases and our online book clubs. And of course, you can follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. So we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on your device. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. But when it comes time for questions, do make sure that those end up in the Q&A so that we can most easily find them. And I believe that that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce Tracee Stanley, a noted and lineaged teacher of Yoga Nidra, meditation, and self-inquiry. Her practices are inspired by the tradition of Himalayan masters and Sri Vidya Tantra, which she was initiated in 2001. She is the co-founder of the Empowered Wisdom Yoga Nidra School and created the Empowered Life Self-Inquiry Oracle deck. She leads retreats, trains teachers, and presents at festivals and conferences internationally, including at Oprah and Gail's Girls Getaway. Her book, Radiant Rest, is a guide to help you develop a powerful practice of deep relaxation and transformative self-inquiry. In conversation this afternoon, I am so happy to welcome Anne Phyfe Palmer, a local author and yoga teacher and the founder of 8 Limbs Yoga Centers in Seattle. Her books include This Life of Mine, a legacy journal, and the upcoming This Family of Mine, a keepsake journal, which you can pre-order. I will be linking in the chat. So thank you both so very much for being here. I'm so excited to be a fly in the wall for this conversation. If you need anything, of course, give me a shout. I will be listening. And the same, of course, goes for all of you in the chat. Let me know if anything comes up. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to our authors. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much, Allie. It's great to be here. And thank you, Anne Phyfe. Oh, we can't hear
Hello,
you, Anne Phyfe.
Tracee. Yeah.
Yes, there you are. Hi.
Hi. It's so great to see you virtually. And welcome virtually to Seattle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, this book, first I want to start with the word radiance, one of the most evocative words, both in English and in Sanskrit, Shri, and so beautifully seated next to the word rest. When I get, all I have to do is say radiant rest, and I feel it evokes the state that you're inviting us into. And your subtitle, Yoga Nidra for Deep Relaxation, an awakened clarity. That really says it all, because it speaks to both the relax, the rest, but also the possibility of being awake while we're resting. So we'll jump right into the word yoga, or the word Nidra. And many of you in yogic practices are aware of this word, translated as sleep, which to many probably sounds pretty good. But in Radiant Rest, you unpack the word a little further, the Sanskrit word Nidra, and break it down into its roots, Nit and Dru. I would love for you to share with us your understanding of this amazing word and about the practice of Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, thank you so much for that beautiful opening and question, because that definition of Nidra is something that when I understood a little bit more about the etymology of the word ni, meaning void, and Dru, meaning that which is drawn from, or that which is revealed by, it really was like, oh, this is such an interesting thing, because it really resonates with my experience of the practice, where it almost felt that something was always being revealed to me within the practice, and that I was always going somewhere, not always, but oftentimes going into this place that felt like a void that couldn't really be described, but that I was bringing something back with me from that deep, dark place that wasn't scary, but felt like almost like a womb.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you're taking me to something that I didn't even think about talking about, those different points of practice that are so powerful, but that's for another moment. For now, this book, it just has so many layers to access and to unpack. And I know I'll be working with it for so long. I mean, you give us so many tools, not only information, but also different ways to inquire. So what I wanted to do tonight is to focus on 3 themes that I found in the book that really spoke to me, and have a couple questions around those, just to help our viewers know what they'll receive from this book. So the first is the acknowledgement of lineage. So you were introduced tonight by Ali, a lineage teacher. To me, acknowledging, and the way you do this, you're naming the source of these practices and who, when, how they were passed down over time. You also talk a lot about empowerment of the practitioner, including yourself as the author, as a practitioner, as a teacher, to deeply embody the practices and to allow creativity to unfold, so that you're not getting stuck in dogma or shoulds. And you really encourage us to find practices that fit our lives. And you even have a whole chapter about the householder, which is one of my favorites in the book. We'll get to that in a moment. And then the third thing I really noticed in your book is you bring a constant awareness and a calling out of trauma, of inequity, and of positionality. And you are naming these as things that very deeply impact our ability to access yoga. So yeah, so much. So starting with lineage, you in this book survey the history and the teachings of Yoga Nidra and help us see how different streams of teachings, I always think of it as just they're coming through time, and how they brought Yoga Nidra into the modern world. And you also highlight several female teachers, such as Mataji and Uma Dinsmore Thule. Can you tell us about how this research came about? Were you seeking? Did things come to you? Tell us about your research.
Oh, that's such a great question. So, lineage, as you know, because we know each other and we've been studying in similar lineages for a really long time, is really important as the foundation of practice. Because when you are studying from a lineage, especially if it's unbroken, there is this link back to the original sages, the original teachers, and there is a feeling of power and transmission that can come with that. And at the same time, what I found is that there also can tend to be these very masculine edges and boxes that also come with that. And one of the things that really struck me as I was kind of going into my journey of wanting to learn more about Yoga Nidra was in a workshop that I did with the teacher, Sri Devi Bringi, who is a professor at Naropa and a scientist and a yogini for all of her life. And she talked about Yoga Nidra as a goddess. And it was the first time that I had ever heard this idea of Yoga Nidra as a goddess. And then she related it back to the Devi Mahatmya. And it was one of those things where I was like, how did I miss this? How did I read this text so many times and really kind of not pick up on the fact that not only is Yoga Nidra a technique, not only is it a state of consciousness, but she is a goddess. And so that started to lead me into a place of really curiosity, of wondering, where else is this feminine force being kind of, sublimated into the background? And then my good friend, who you also know, Chanti Takarante Perez, pointed out to me in the book of the Himalayan Masters, the small chapter about Mataji. And I went back to read that chapter that talks about, so the Himalayan Masters is a book by Swami Rama, who is one of the teachers in the lineage. And you've got
it right there.
Yeah. And it was so interesting to really read this really short chapter about how he was in Kamakya at the temple. And there was this woman who said that she didn't sleep, but she was like 90 something years old and she was like a bag of bones, but she had, her eyes were like, filled with Shri and filled with Shakti. And he was just, spying on her to find out, like, what is it that she's doing? And eventually she took him on as a student. And as she took him on as a student, she taught him the practice of Yoga Nidra, which he had never heard of before. And she also told him about the states of consciousness: waking state, dreaming state, deep sleep state, and the fourth state of Turiya. And it led him to be able to understand those states to the point where he wrote this translation of the Mandukya Upanishads, which many people say is one of his greatest works. And so again, if we don't look, these things are missed because we really start to think about Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is a feminine practice. It's a practice of being held. Yet it is being delivered a lot of times by male teachers. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I do believe that there is some of the essence of the mother, some of the essence of that nurturing and the honoring of us as women and as this feminine practice kind of gets lost because it becomes a technique that's like, this is how you do it, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if you don't do it this way, you're not doing it correctly. And the thing is that indigenous cultures and mothers and people have been doing this practice for eons without even having a name to it. And so for me, it's about reclaiming that. It's about reclaiming the fact that I've had many students who've never practiced Yoga Nidra before, but when they hear what Yoga Nidra is and they do it, they're like, wait a second, I think I've done this before, just kind of organically. I found this space between waking and sleeping, this liminal space that just feels so blissful. And I never knew what it was. And now I can finally give it a name.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'm kind of going back to when I remember first hearing Yoga Nidra practices. They were, the ones I experienced at first were so scripted or so dun, 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 and then you do this, and then you see this. And I enjoyed them, but I didn't quite get as much as I've gotten from practices like yours that are spacious, that are evocative. And I mean, there's one phrase you have in one of them, I think, or a couple of your recording. We have to make sure to tell folks how to listen to your recordings on Shambhala's website. There's such a simple, you invite us to, on the in-breath, feel the earth come up to support us. And then one of them you say on the out-breath, dropping down into that support. To me, it's such a feminine support. And then I think another one you say, the earth on the inhale rises up, and then on the exhale, you remember your desire to be free. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it is. Thank you for that. And you know, the first time I ever heard that idea of the earth rising up to greet you was from Rolf Sovik. Yeah. And when I started to practice it, it was like, oh, I can actually feel this. And not only can I feel this, but now I can add to it, because my relationship with this practice is deepening. My relationship with my oldest ancestor of the earth, my trust in the earth has deepened to the point where I can recognize that when I'm exhaling and I'm allowing the earth to hold me, that I'm connecting to my desire to be free.
I love it. And you said something just now that I want to keep threading, is that you have spent so much time with this practice that you're embodying it so much that you're able to keep evolving it. And to me, that relates to our second theme of empowerment. You know, in this book, you know, lineage, we both, as we've said, have practiced in lineages for many years. But then there's this piece of hierarchy that comes in when you're in a lineage, because you're getting information from the teacher, and you're receiving, right? Which is so powerful and so important about how these teachings have been passed down. But empowerment is also so important. And it's, to me, in your book, An Evolution, on page 20, you say, it is an important tantric concept that all of the teachings lead you back to your inner teacher. So I'll say that again, you know, in other words, like any practice of yoga, and what I've heard too is any teacher, any outer teacher is there to bring you back to your inner teacher. And the practice of yoga, Nidra, is no different. We're continuing the quote. No dogma is intended in these pages. There are many ways to practice, and they all lead to the same place. So to me, you're giving the ultimate offering as a teacher, the empowerment of the student to find their own way with these practices. So generous and so non-hierarchical. Clearly, you felt empowered to do this. So I want you, if you could tell us about what helped you to feel this empowerment, and about your method, if there is one, of melding what you've learned through lineage and what comes to you from within. Do you want to repeat that?
Yeah, no, I got that, and I felt it.
Great,
you know,
even better.
The empowerment really comes from the understanding of that concept, that the teacher is there to lead you back to your own inner knowing. The practice is the teacher. So the teacher, or the guru, in my opinion, is handing you the practice, that if you do the practice, and maybe you need their guidance a little bit here and there, it will lead you back to your inner knowing. It will lead you back to your inner teacher. And so for me, it was an interesting process, because I had been doing my own practice and beginning to self-guide myself in Yoga Nidra practices, and beginning to record my experiences and free journal and write afterwards. And before I knew it, I had many journals about the experiences of these practices, and even felt like I was beginning to be led, like I would have in my mind, okay, I know this practice by heart, and I've been doing it for so long. And then I would kind of be led to something else like in the practice. And it wasn't me, it didn't feel like me leading it. It just felt like I was following something else, some other thread. And at the same time, when Shambhala reached out to me to ask me to write this book, I had been working on a completely different project. And that project had a little bit of Yoga Nidra in it, like one chapter about Yoga Nidra. And I thought to myself, well, there's this person who has a book on Yoga Nidra, and there's that person, and there's this person writing a book. And then I started to think, because, you know, they were really like, we think you have something to offer. And I had to really sit with this idea of hierarchy, right? Because it's the hierarchy that says, who do you think you are to do X, Y, and Z, to teach X, Y, and Z, to offer X, Y, and Z? And I said to myself, well, you know, as opposed to writing a book about Yoga Nidra, like a beginner's guide, what is my relationship to Yoga Nidra? Because I feel like my relationship is a deep relationship that moves beyond a relationship of technique and practice, but the state of consciousness, moving towards it, and the goddess in all her many forms. And how can I write a book that just gives people a guide to cultivate their own relationship with Yoga Nidra? Not to try to, for me to put in a box of this is how I did it and this is how you should do it, but let me be generous with all the many ways in which I developed my relationship. And then hopefully people can choose what resonates with them most and find one path there. And so I feel like what I did, and hopefully it comes through, is that I really try to source the main teachings and techniques of what I had been offered and what I had been practicing, and basically kind of bookended it with ways in which to enter the practice, which I think are really important, and ways in which to come back from the practice and to really see the practice as a ritual. That every time you go into a ritual, there's an African teacher from Burkina Faso, her name is Sabun Fasome, and she talks about this idea that when you go into a ritual and you come back from the ritual, that you are changed and that you have to acknowledge that you are changed. And so there are so many different threads of influences of teachings that I infused into what does it mean to be devoted to your practice, to have a relationship with all these forms of Yoga Nidra, to see it as a ritual, and then to allow your life to become a ritual so that Yoga Nidra is not just something that you're doing when you're laying on the mat. It actually becomes an awareness that threads through your life, because that wakefulness that we weave through all those states of consciousness, when you come back to the waking state after practicing consistently, you have a different kind of awareness and clarity that is really sharp and open and, you know, joyful a lot of times.
What you're just saying is making me want to invite the people here to just make sure that they know how amazing Yoga Nidra is. So I just want to kind of give a little advertisement for Yoga Nidra, even though this whole hour is that, right? I practice Yoga Nidra often in the morning or in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. And I want to, like, those readers who ever have a hard time getting to sleep or a hard time coming down with their nervous system, this practice is like an almost instantaneous shift of the nervous system. And I think of it as like I get fluffy. You know, I can be someone who can be very forward. I mean, like I sit forward, I'm always busy, I'm very much a doer. And Yoga Nidra is this antidote for that. And it invites me and invites all of us to lay down or stand, as you say in your offering, that you can do it in any shape you need, right? it invites us to soften and, I don't know, get fluffy is kind of it's just what I'm going to say right now. Is
I love that. Get fluffy.
Oh my gosh. All right. What I'd like to ask you about next is this amazing chapter called The Householder's Flow. So for those of you who haven't heard this term, the householder is someone who is a spiritual seeker, but is living in the world, you know, pays a mortgage or rent or lives in a tent, but is moving through the world and has responsibilities, right? And you have written a whole chapter to us. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to read that beautiful poem that you wrote and tell us a little bit about how this chapter came to be. Do you have it handy?
I do. Thank you for asking.
Just so happens.
It's one of my favorites. So the householder's prayer. The altar is in my heart. The sun and the moon are my gurus. I trust the earth to support me. Each time I close my eyes, I enter the void. My heart is the portal to my sacred cave. I whisper the names of the divine as I prepare my meals. I notice the flow of my beloved's breath as they fall asleep, and I synchronize my breath to the flow of love. I place a blessing in the pause between the breaths. I hold the power to create a new reality with every thought. I honor silence as a blessing. I explore who I am and who I am not in the mirror of relationship. I question my beliefs with curiosity and courage. I honor my ancestors. I lay down all self-doubt with compassion and forgiveness. I remember the light of my soul as I enter the dream state. I recall the beauty of truth as I transition from sleep to waking. I know the vibration of truth. I remember that nothing is mundane. I honor the power of transition as a portal to transformation. Everything is an offering. My life is a sacred ritual.
So that poem is like an antidote for those of us who are dedicated to the path, but also have commitments. And it can feel always, I know for me, that I'm not doing enough, or, you know, I have this very Western approach to what needs to be happening. And so I have this poem close to my heart. I read it this morning, and just it really helps to create an antidote for that. Do you want to talk at all about how you decided to create this chapter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, coming from lineage-based teachings, there's a lot of discipline. At least that's how I experienced it. And I am also acknowledging that that could be a projection, because my father was very much a disciplinarian. So as I was receiving information about you need to do 125,000 repetitions of such and such mantra, I received that as a discipline, like you better do it at the same time, same place, you know, every day. And what I know is that it was because of my lifestyle. When I was receiving those teachings, I was able, because I didn't have children, I was able to do those practices. I had space to be able to do those practices. And then what I noticed as a teacher is that I had a little bit of that masculine edge when I would ask people to do like a 40-day sadhana practice. And then when something would happen and they would like miss, or they would stop doing it for whatever reason, it was kind of like, well, how come you can't like get that done? You know?
Come on.
And then I started to think about my own life. And as I started to get busier with my career, I started to realize, oh, I actually don't have time. And then I was in a relationship with a partner who had kids and had grandkids, and, you know, things were starting to get full. And I started to realize, oh, I need to be able to figure out a way to infuse these practices in the moments when I have downtime, or even in the moments when I'm washing the dishes or mopping the floor or driving to my next appointment, because this yoga is not something that is happening just when I'm in the studio or on my mat. It's happening all the time. So why can't I just bring it in? But the real reason why I wanted to make sure that it was in the book and that it was really giving people tools and ways to weave the practices into their life, even if they only have 3 minutes every day to do so, is because most of my students, that was their biggest concern, was that they have this deep desire, like really a heartfelt desire, that they really wanted to access these teachings, the practices, and it was almost painful that they felt that they didn't have time to do it. And I had an
That's a great
experience.
description.
I had an experience with the
Mhm.
dad who had like 5 kids who came to a workshop. And I was at the end of the workshop, I was telling people, okay, you know, you can do this for 40 days. And I could see him like really looking like very angry. And so we had this conversation in the class about how to reframe with this idea of practices, because we have been given this bag of goods that yoga practice needs to be an hour or an hour and a half for it to be valid. And if you do anything less than that, it's not even worth it. Or you know, you're just not a good yogini or a good yogi. And I'm just saying that that is 100% not true, because we can take 3 minutes of just breathing. We can take 3 minutes of just repeating a mantra. We can take 1 minute of remembering the light at the heart just before we go to sleep. And we are still doing yoga. And so I wanted people to be able to reclaim their practice and make their practice their own to fit their life in a way that might be something that doesn't look like anything anyone's ever done before. You know, and that is, I feel like we're taking then a kind of forward movement for our own lineage and our own legacy, to show our own family how we can weave spirituality, we can weave practice into our daily life and make a shift, because we know that our family likes us a lot better when we practice.
Amen. In fact, why not, just to demonstrate that, I just want to invite everyone just to sit and take 3 breaths right now. Thank you. Throughout this book, Tracee, you acknowledge the impact of racism and other abuses of humanity on our bodies to differing degrees, depending on power dynamics, situations, as well as the fact that some lineage holders who've passed down amazing information have behaved badly. And I want to thank you for doing this in a way that never turns away from the truth, but is also allowing the reader to take in the truth in a way that's actually possible. You know, I think you and I both know, many of us know, that truth isn't always something our bodies and our minds can actually receive. Some things like the reality of systemic racism, especially in this country, it's too much to actually absorb all at once. So you do this in a way that never turns away from the truth and allows the reader to not only see the truth, but also stay connected to the practice, to not have to disconnect from the practices and their power to affect change. I'm going to read, it's kind of a long example, but I like to read an example from the book of how you do this. And I invite those, I won't keep saying the reader, but I invite the audience really to listen to these words with your, not just your mind, but your body, or maybe your heart. These are Tracee's words from page 51 and 52. Deep relaxation practices help us to relax systematically and to bring awareness to all the parts of ourselves that require loving attention. Because we are taking a journey through the subtle body as we practice, that awareness may extend to our physical body, our thoughts, and even our beliefs. Unfortunately, it is a common tendency to identify with and hold on for dear life to parts of ourselves, like thoughts and beliefs, that lead to patterns of behavior that do not support our thriving. Because of our own insecurities, fears, and biases, we may hold on to ways of being that ensure that others cannot thrive, especially when we are in positions of power. This shows up as systemic racism, misogyny, or mistreatment of others as a way to protect ourselves from perceived harm and scarcity. Certain habits and thoughts may feel familiar and safe, and they can be reinforced by those around us. But that doesn't mean that they aren't keeping us stuck. We may be scared that if we let go of these long-held ways of being, we will dissolve, even if they are causing us or others pain. I'm going to read that again. We may be scared that if we let go of these long-held ways of being, we will dissolve, even if they are causing us or others pain. The more we rely on what is familiar, the less we will grow. If we can create an opportunity in our Yoga Nidra practice to create more awareness and ease within ourselves, it will be reflected outward in our lives. You have many more direct passages in your book, but I found this one incredibly artful and subtle. And you're speaking both I think you're speaking both to those who are impacted and those who are causing harm. Would you be willing to talk about this passage or any other in this vein in your book, Tracee?
Yeah. I mean, this passage really is speaking to the language of samskara, right? Of those impressions, those mental impressions that we kind of take in over time that we file as good, bad, or neutral. And that after a while, if we think about seeing life through like a clear windscreen when we first start out, those impressions are creating like these kind of flats on our windscreen, almost like bugs. And when we don't clean that windscreen because we're not aware, right, it basically starts to create this coloring. And then we see life through that coloring. And if that coloring becomes concretized, that coloring actually becomes our personality and our belief system. And then we actually believe that we are the coloring. And then we're really stuck. And so yoga is this process of allowing us to start to scrape off the coloring so we can see what's really there. And when we do that, whatever the belief is, you get to examine it and you get to hopefully see even maybe where it originated. And you get to move closer to the truth. And so for me, you know, I feel like Yoga Nidra is one of these practices that doesn't ask you to intellectualize your beliefs. It actually somehow allows them to rise up to the surface for you to see in the light. And then if you have self-inquiry within the practice or after the practice, you get to really inquire about that. And you know, I really feel like I wanted to add this in, first of all, being a Black woman in the yoga, you know, world as a student, and then as a teacher for over 20 something years. I was often the only Black person in a room, the only person of color. And so, you know, I was fortunate that I had the means to be able to access these deep teachings because these teachings are transformative. But we all deserve to be able to have these teachings. And so that's been something that, you know, in 2001, I opened a donation-only yoga studio in LA specifically for this reason, to be able to bring everyone who didn't have access everyone who didn't have the funds to be able to access these types of teachings. But I think that it's important to really name in the book, because we all have something. We all have some sort of trauma, whether it's in this lifetime or whether it's generational and ancestral, whether we know it or we don't know it. The question is, do we know the impact that it actually has on our being and on our beliefs and on how we move through the world? And I really believe that the more we practice Yoga Nidra, the more we're able to actually dismantle those things within ourselves that are untrue, that are holding us back. And when we see how to do that within our own selves, when we go out into the world, I believe it is a little bit easier for us to see the path, because we've actually embodied the process of dismantling something that is so held within us as a truth, that we actually get to be able to see how to shift the world, really. But we have to do it within ourselves first, is my opinion. Otherwise, I think it becomes a little bit more difficult. So it's important because this, a lot of times, and I know that a lot of yoga teachers will be reading this book, hopefully. And sometimes, depending on the spaces that you teach in, these are things that you don't even think about because they don't really affect you. Things like racism may not affect you, right? And you don't know the harm that you could be doing to someone in your space with your words and with your actions. You don't know the harm that you might be perpetuating to someone who has suffered trauma with your words, and even how you're setting up the room and how you ask people to lie down and how you ask them to relax. So for me, it was important to touch on these topics, and then also to have resources in the back of the book for other books and people who have gone deep into these topics, like Resmaa Mekanam and Dr. Gail Parker. So, that's why I offer the resources in the book.
Great. Resmaa, my grandmother's hands. Everyone needs to read that.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Everyone. Yes. I 100% agree.
Game changer. Such good game changer. And I listened, I think it was your right, research, and I listened to your interview with Gail Parker on your podcast. So y'all check out Tracee's podcast. It has some great music. I can't get out of my head. It's the beginning of your podcast.
That. My stepson will love that. He composed the music. So
that's awesome. And I don't mean to move away from this very important subject, because it actually really, you talk about it in a way as in, like, if you do the practice, you'll work through some scars. Well, my experience is there are plenty of people working through some scars that aren't looking at white supremacy, racism, misogyny. So it has to be brought up, in my opinion. And you do that in a way that I just really appreciate. And I hope that we continue to see that more and more in books about yoga.
Thank you.
So we're getting close to our close.
I have a question for you, though.
Okay.
Because we have known each other for a really long time. We've practiced beside each other for years. We've been in India together. And I know that you love this practice of Yoga Nidra, and at the same time, you are extremely creative. And you have a new book that's getting ready to come out in September, right? And the name of the book is This Family of Ours, a Keepsake Journal, which is a follow-up to This Life of Mine, a legacy journal. Ooh, and you just got it today, right?
Perfect. Yeah, I got it in the mail yesterday. This is the only copy that exists. No, it's the only copy that I've seen. That's
amazing. One. Congratulations.
Thanks.
My question is, how has rest and this practice of Yoga Nidra impacted your creativity and your ability to be able to just be a creative being in the world as a householder?
Oh, thank you. That's a very layered question. and I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a circular way. I think as a young person, I'm one of those people that has more energy than anyone ever deserved or needed. And that actually look at me, I'm like doing this, over my life actually became problematic in different ways. It had impacted other people. I think I have been what's the word, juggernaut. And I had some experiences that knocked me down to my knees. And one of them was an experience of utter exhaustion and, all kinds of things happening, some trauma, some shock trauma, some menopause, all these things. And I was completely knocked out. And I'd never been that way in my whole life. I'd been always just able. And I learned so much about the brain, about the nervous system, about capacity, about kindness, self-compassion. And what got me out of that time, which was several months, was self-compassion practices and yoga nidra. These practices that are so, again, fluffy. And they fluffed me up. They took me from this just like desiccated state of just being like no juice, no creativity, no heart, no spiritual inclination whatsoever, to coming back and being really full again. So that's like one way of answering that. And the other is just when I do yoga nidra, everything is better. When I do yoga nidra, everything feels different. There's like the anxiety goes, and even just a 15-minute practice can do that. So, and as far as creativity, with writing, I find that it's more just the overall, right? Like if I have room in my life for rest, or if I rest and do yoga nidra, I have the creativity bubbles up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'll say.
I love that. Yes. I feel like every creative person should be doing yoga nidra because the downloads and the inspiration are on point.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Well, we can see now if we have some questions from our audience. I have more questions for Tracee, but I want to give you all a chance to ask Tracee questions. So I'm going to look in Ralph, who is, Rolf Solvik, is it SOLVIK?
I think it's SO. I think it's, here, let me try to write it into the chat. I believe this is
it Solvik or Slovik? I can't remember.
I think it's SOVIK. SOVIK.
Oh, right.
Rolf Solvik. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's in Buffalo, right? He's part of the Himalayan Institute. Is he in Buffalo or in Honesdale?
I believe that he's now in Honesdale.
Oh yeah. They're all coming home.
Yeah, but he's been really singing the praises of Yoga Nidra for a very long time. And I know one of his teachers was also Swami Veda Bharati, and obviously Swami Rama. So yeah.
Great, thanks Angela for that question. Keep them coming. But as you're thinking of your questions, we have Moving Inward, which is a wonderful book of his.
Yes, great. Moving Inward is great. It's amazing. I use that for my meditation teacher training as the required reading. It's an incredible book.
So I'll use this as an opportunity to make sure that you all know that Tracee not only writes books and teaches yoga, but she also offers training. So you should check out her website and look at the trainings that she offers. She's probably not doing a lot right this very second because she has a book coming out, but keep watching for more and check out her podcast, I'm talking about Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle, because I've been listening to her podcast a lot. Remind us
the podcast is actually Radiant Rest. So the podcast is Radiant Rest. We are actually about to onboard a new cohort for the summer for a training that starts in August for Yoga Nidra. And then there is a new training that is a bridge program because we had so many people who were therapists and counselors and school teachers who had no yoga experience or teacher training background, but they wanted to bring Yoga Nidra into their classrooms or into their work. So my partner, Chanti Tacarante Perez, and I have created a bridge program so that you don't have to do that 200-hour yoga teacher training that is our prerequisite for the Yoga Nidra training, but it gives you pretty much everything that you need to understand in order to be able to move into the training. So that is also happening. And yeah, you can find out all about that on my website, traceeyoga.com.
And I will also put in a plug for Tracee's coming back to Seattle on July 21st to teach at 8 Limbs Yoga Centers. And I'll get the link and throw it in the chats. It is an evening Wednesday night. We kept it away from the weekend so that the summer stuff, you want to just come on a Wednesday night. So I'll get that in the chats in a few moments, but that's an evening with Tracee.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I'm excited about that virtual rest event.
So lovely. I have a question from Giovanna. When doing Yoga Nidra, I unwillingly fall asleep. Is there something you can suggest to allow me to stay more aware?
Yeah, so there's two things that I would suggest, Giovanna. One is the old trick of keeping your arm up. So you just put your elbow on the earth and you keep your arm up while you practice. And what will happen is as you start to fall asleep, the arm will start to drift and you can kind of wake yourself back up. That's one. Two is you can, prior to practice, you can set an intention that you are going to stay awake and aware. And then the third way is this practice that's in the book. It's called the 108 countdown. And so the 108 countdown is that before you go to sleep, as you're going to sleep, you start to count backwards from 108 all the way to 0. And most likely you probably won't make it to 0, and you'll start to feel that moment of that liminal space where you feel like you're about to fall asleep. And you'll say, okay, to yourself, the last number is 54. I'm going to drift off to sleep. In the middle of the night, you might wake up just a little bit, toss and turn. You just remember the number that you left off at. And then you start to count back down until you fall asleep again. And then when you wake up in the morning, you recall the number that you left off on. So this is a way of being able to thread wakefulness through your nighttime. It will definitely help you to start to stay more awake and aware. And then the fourth thing that I would recommend is the mental alarm clock, which is also one of the practices in the book, that helps you to have this also wakefulness, but this internal clock always kind of ticking through your practice. So those are the four things that I would recommend.
Great, Tracee, thanks for that question, Giovanna. And I'm entering a couple links here. One is for Tracee's workshop, and I'm realizing we have a lot of awesome Yoga Nidra offerings at 8 Limbs, which is the studio I founded now where I work. And there's a monthly class with Tracee Hodgman, and also a monthly sound bath. We've just restarted that in studio sound bath. They're filling out.
That sounds amazing.
But yeah, they are sound bath with crystal bowls and Yoga Nidra.
Who teaches that?
So I have Megan Sloan teaches that. She's been a teacher at 8 Limbs for many years, and we'll be adding more of those, but a couple of options.
That sounds very fluffy.
It's so fluffy. You get your Yoga Nidra nest. I love how you talk about it. Your Yoga Nidra nest.
Yeah.
Everybody, let me say while we're waiting for more questions is that this book not only is beautiful, it feels beautiful, but it also has amazing drawings in it. And let's see if I can just come to one that are super evocative and unique. So here's one.
Yeah.
What
my illustrator, Maggie, Eileen, what I loved about her is that she did all the practices and she then did the drawings, and she's a beautiful, amazing practitioner in her own right and teacher in her own right. So she really captured it.
She sure did. Is this Octavia's dream?
That is actually my grandmother. That's my great grandmother. Yeah, and that's me there. But that can be any of us, and all the trees and all the nature and the sun and the moon around us. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions, y'all? All right, I'm going to ask you one more question, I think, Tracee. I want to highlight that this book has, I'm a big fan of inquiry. I'm a big fan of asking questions. That's what all my books are. They're basically just questions to help you record things. And you have some really good ones in there. And you encourage us to have a journal that is for our yoga nidra practice, and to, you say it after each practice. Okay, go write. Like, yeah, such a great reminder. And in the section about the 4 stages of consciousness, you ask a set of questions. And let me see, since I think I only have time for one, I'm going to ask you, what is your personal definition of spiritual freedom? And I'm going to sneak the second one in because I want to ask this one too. And what do you imagine freedom looks like for all beings on this earth? Just that.
Just that. Spiritual freedom is knowing our true power. Knowing that our true power is not something that is external from us, but that is something that is innate. It is something that is eternal. And it is our birthright to taste it in this lifetime and to have the tools to get there. And the liberation really is a collective. You know, we've heard this saying many times that if one of us is not free, then none of us is free, right? And so we really have to want, I think, for others to feel and know that power within themselves. And if we have a desire or a thought that others don't deserve to know that place within them as true, we have to question why. We have to question why.
I want to have you repeat everything you just said again. I had to close my eyes to just take in what you're saying. And you're perfectly leading me into what I wanted to close with, because this was another of your phrases that really struck me. You say, rest is vital to thriving. We have gotten the message now that we need to actively make time for rest, to take up space, and to clear and protect space for those who have been denied the ability to rest safely. So all of us here, I invite us to take this book in and have it support you in resting, and continue to think of how you can clear the space for folks who might not have received that ability to rest safely. Do you have a final message for us tonight, or a final words? And I know we need to turn it back to our friend at third place.
I think my only final words is just remember that you deserve to thrive, and that rest is a portal to thriving. It's a portal to your ancestors. It's a portal to healing. It's a portal to so many things. And each individual will have their own unique experience with this practice, and cultivating a relationship with the practice in all of her forms is the way for you to heal.
Rest is vital to thriving. Giovanna added, finally being able to have a relationship with rest, and gratitude to you for sharing Yoga Nidra with the world. I'm going to echo that. Thank you so much, Tracee. It's so great
Thank
to
you, Anne
be
Phyfe.
with you. I miss you.
I know, I miss you too. I look forward to the day when we can hug in person.
Yes,
Thank you
me
so
too.
much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah. And thanks to Third Place for the opportunity. Turning it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Allie.
Of course. Thank you both so much for being here. This was such a warm and wonderful conversation. All of you in the audience who would like to get your hands on a copy of Radiant Rest or the upcoming This Family of Mine, go ahead and follow the links in the chat. There are so many great links in this chat to many things. So definitely go through and click to open the ones that interest you right now as I sort of wrap this up. All of you, of course, if you are local, come on in, tell a bookseller that you were here and that you enjoyed this. We always love to hear from you. If you are not local, hit us up on Twitter, scream at us. We would love to hear from you. Tracee and Anne Phyfe, one more huge thank you for being here. This was such a pleasure to be a part of, and I'm sure the audience feels the same way. They're all clapping. You just can't hear them. So I think that this is where the evening ends. So I think we can all sort of begin our awkward waving and say good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.